Hi, ladies. We had a great first class this morning, and I just thought it would be helpful if I went ahead and went through all of the melt moves that we practiced today so that you'll be able to enjoy them during the week and really feel like you're kind of getting it, just another opportunity to see it and hear it, okay? So the first thing that we did was we started with a foot treatment. So I'm just going to go ahead and get my camera to come down a little bit, and I'll run through the softball full melt series. We started with our feet hip distance apart, and you're assessing your body weight on your feet. You're assessing the weight of your body on the balls of the feet, the back of the foot at the heel, the side of the foot, in towards the big toe mound. And you want to think about if one foot feels a little bit heavier than the other one. So this is just a general assessment. You can scan up your shins, think about your kneecaps. Ideally they're nice and soft, but for a lot of us, myself included, they're always pulled back into the joint. And so that means that my quadricep muscles, the muscles above my knees, and my gluteus muscles are always tight, and they get tired when they hold themselves under contraction like that. So it's just a general assessment. And then from here, I'm going to take my foot onto the ball. I'm right there at position number 1. It's smack dab in the center. And I'm going to tip my body weight from side to side. And I do that for about, 10 to 30 seconds. From here, I'm going to come back. Both feet are on the floor. I'm going to bend my knees and rotate my spine, swing my arms around. Come on back up when you're ready. Take the ball into position number 2, which is right there underneath the big toe mound. And I'm going to give it a press. And you'll be able to see on the video that, excuse me, my knuckle pops right up to the surface. And that's really what you want to see. I'm going to move the ball into my second toe, and I'm going to do the same thing. When you can see the knuckles coming up to the surface from pressure below, then you know that you don't have any inflammation in your foot. If the foot feels like it's kind of puffy on the top, then you could have inflammation in your foot, and that means you could have inflammation in your gut. From there, we went into position 3A, which is deeper into the foot. Give it a little press. Then roll the ball up into 3B. That's just underneath the ball of my foot. I'm going to bring the ball over to position number 4, in between the pinky and the heel, and press. Bring it back to position number 5. Put a little pressure on that. And then ease your body weight off of your foot. You go into your glide. Move the ball onto your heel. Come back to position 5. Put a little extra body weight on there and give it a good scratch. This is your shear technique. Hold it and wait. Take your foot completely off the ball, and we're going to rinse across the ball of the foot, taking the ball underneath the big toe mound right there in the ball of the foot. I'm going to pivot on my heel, and I'm going to push the ball into the ball of my foot, and I'm going to release the ball to bring it back to the big toe mound. Put some pressure on it and pivot and release. Do that at least 3 times. And we're going to do another rinse that goes from the big toe mound back towards the heel. And you can see I've taken my my left heel completely off the mat as I transition my body weight forward onto my right foot. And I'm moving the fluid from the ball of my foot back towards my heel. I'm going to do that for each knuckle and long bone. And after I've done those 5 knuckles, then you can do it 3 more times anywhere you want. My eye gaze is straight ahead. I'm looking right across the patio. And then from here, I'm going to do friction. Let your thighs shake. That's going to help to pull the fluid right up into the spine. And then from here, I'll do it on the other side. I'm going to take it right into position number 1. Tip my body weight side to side. Position 1 is associated with the arches and domes of the body, with your diaphragm, with your eyes. From here, settle both feet onto the floor, bend your knees, rotate your spine, swing your arms around. Come on back up when you're ready. Take the ball into position number 2, right underneath the big toe. You shouldn't see it poke out on the side of your foot or in between your toes. Take the ball into the second toe knuckle and press. Into the third toe knuckle and press. Be as precise as you can. Know that the ball of the foot drops down as you move the ball deeper into the deeper into the ball of the foot. I'm in position 3A, which is deep in my foot. Give it a little press. This is associated with your lumbar spine. Roll it up to 3B. This is your thoracic spine. Come over into position number 4. This is the metabolic point. And then come back to position 5, which is the pelvic area. Ease your body weight off. Go ahead and do a little bit of a glide, just looking for trouble. It's a light touch, even pressure, side to side. Move the ball onto your heel. Come back to position number 5. Settle your body weight on the foot, give it a good scratch. Hold it and wait. Take your foot completely off the ball and bring the ball to the big toe mound. Let your heel be heavy on the floor, put some weight on your foot and pivot, and then lighten the load on the ball of the foot. So you're going to press down on the ball and push the ball over towards the pinky toe and lighten the pressure as you bring it back. Do it one more time. From here, I'm going to do a rinse down the bottom of my foot. I'm going to start at that big toe mound. I'm going to push the ball towards the heel. Okay, back up so you can see that a little bit better. Take that right back. And you'll see I can pinch that ball right between my heel and the mat. My eye gaze is straight ahead. And I do that for each knuckle and long bone. And then just a few more times, anywhere you like. We're pushing the fluid from the ball of the foot back to the heel. And then from here, we do friction. Let that thigh shake. I always say it's the only time in nature I don't mind my thigh shaking. And then go ahead and bring the ball underneath your right foot. Do it one more time, that little quickie friction. And then settle your feet back down onto the floor or onto your mat and just assess how you feel. Ideally, both feet will be evenly weighted to the floor. You'll notice that there's a little energy, maybe a little warmth, a little vibration. That's really great to get the fluids moving. Maybe you'll notice that you're not pressing into the ball of the foot or leaning back on your heels, or you're on the outside or inside, but it feels evenly weighted. Perfect, yeah? Okay, so from here we did a rest assess. So you're just gonna lie down on your mat. Let's see, I don't know if you'll be able to see me real well, and I don't really know if you need to be honest. Hi. Okay. Hi. Oh, let me give it down a little bit more. There we go, kinda. Okay, so my arms and legs are straight. My palms are turned up towards the ceiling. I don't want to throw anything in the pool by mistake. Okay, and I just settle into my body and I'm just assessing how I feel. So I start with my shoulder blades. Ideally, they feel wide and flat, but I might notice that they feel a little pokey into the floor. And if they're pokey, that means I have dehydrated tissue surrounding my shoulder blades. Take a finger, poke it into your belly button, and just notice if you feel like the bottom of your rib cage, which you'll feel if you follow this line through your body before it hits the mat, it bumps into the bottom of your rib cage. And so if you feel like it's lifted away, you'll notice that there's an arch in your back, and that will tell you you have hyperextension of the spinal column, and that's going to create a little extra wear and tear on your back, and it creates some back pain. It could be creating some issues with digestion and respiration. So you're just going to notice. Bring your hand back down onto the floor and think about the way your hips feel on the floor. And ideally, you're resting on your butt cheeks. I feel like I'm a little higher than that. So I'm on the big bone at the back of my pelvis. Sometimes people feel like it's lower towards the tailbone. So just notice how you feel. From here, we travel down to the backs of your thighs. And ideally, the backs of the thighs are weighted to the floor, but you might notice that they're lifted away. So if the pelvis is not settled on the butt cheeks, you have dehydration in the pelvic girdle. And that means you could end up with low back pain or hip pain, even leg pain, knee pain, sciatic pain. So once I've mentioned to you that I feel like dehydrated tissue changes the shape of the spaces of the body, and it either becomes exaggerated, like it's a big space, or it totally flattens out. I've seen both of those scenarios. So just notice what your spaces are doing. From here, divide your body in half, right and left, and ideally you should be evenly weighted and you should be the same length from side to side. I kind of smile because it feels so weird to me when one leg feels like it's reaching across the room, and that just tells me that my nervous system is not very efficient at connecting to the center of gravity in my pelvis, and that's a really easy thing to change. So from there, we just made that assessment. We rolled over into a shoulder and we came up to sitting. So I'm going to get my roller and I'm going to put that down along the length of my mat. And I'm going to sit on the very end. And so I'm just going to move my camera. You can see that I have my knees bent and my feet are flat to the floor. And I know it looks a little weird. If I move away towards the pool, I might fall in. So from here, I'm just going to allow my shoulders to just open out. My palms are on the floor. I'm going to allow my body weight to gently rock right and left. And I do this for about 30 seconds. Everything's moving together. So I'm not turning my head. I'm not shifting my hips. My spinal column is staying on the roller and everything goes right and left. 30 to 60 seconds. Come on back when you're ready. From here, my hands are on my pelvis, the heel of my hands on my hip bone, the fingertips into the pubic bone. And I'm going to go into 3 particular movements. I'm going to go into a tuck. So that means the heel of my hand gets low, the tips of my fingers get high. One thing that I notice here is oftentimes students press their feet into the floor to get themselves into the tuck. See if you can use just your back to move you into this position. And then I'm going to go into my tilt. So it's the opposite. So you'll see my hands change on my pelvis. There's an arch in my back. So now I'm in my tilt position. And what I like to tell people is this the range of motion that the spinal column can perform. I'm going to take myself back down into that tuck. And I'm going to acknowledge that I have weight on my thoracic spine. And ideally, I want to keep that there because remember, I don't want an arch in my back at the thoracic. I only want a little space at my low back curve. So I'm going to keep that space. I'm going to keep that weight on my thoracic spine and I'm just going to ease the low back away. So maybe you've noticed like there's a slight change in position of my hands. So here's my tuck. And now I'm going to release just the low back curve. Now, often I feel like I'm still on the back of my pelvis. So I bring my hands back down to the floor and I just do a little bit of a lift and lower. And that'll help me get a little bit more body weight towards the tailbone. And I'll feel like I have a nice little lift in my low back curve. The next thing that we did was the 3D breath breakdown followed by the 3D breath. So one hand to the chest and one hand to the belly. And I'm just going to take a couple of breaths, breathing in through my nose and out through my mouth. And I'm just noticing how my rib cage moves. In this position, ideally, I should be tapping into the movement of my rib cage up towards the ceiling and back down into the roller. Don't be surprised if you rock on your roller a little bit as I'm doing right now. As I breathe in, my body weight just kind of tips a little side to side. That's okay. That's just my nervous system getting recalibrated. And then from here, I'm going to move my hands to the sides of my rib cage. My elbows are down on the floor. I'm just going to take a couple of breaths in. And I want to see if I can move my ribs out into my hands. So on my inhale, I'm expanding my rib cage. And on my exhale, I let it go. So you can see my ribs are kind of pulling out into my hands. You may or may not notice that because you could have some dry tissue in the ribs that's keeping it kind of locked down. But let's see if that might be one of the things we can work on together. I'm sure it is. From here, we move one hand to the collarbones and the other hand way down to the pubic bone. And I'm going to take a couple of breaths in. And I want to notice that the hands will move away from the midline of my body. After a few breaths, I'll take my hands back onto my belly. I'm going to inhale to prepare. I'm exhaling to engage the core. And that's my 3D breath. I'm not changing my low back. It's still in that neutral position. I'm just drawing the belly button into my body, tightening through the waistband. Remember, you have 3 options for that breath. You can give me an S sound or an H or the SH. So another one that we did today was to take our hands onto our shoulders, and I wanted you to explore the range of motion that you have in the shoulder joint by just making some small circles with your elbows. And I want you to really pay particular attention to any sensations that you feel, whether it be cracking or snapping or popping. And if you notice that, then I want to make your circles smaller and slower. And then I'm going to reverse the direction, keeping your elbows oriented more towards the ceiling, rather than towards the floor or even the sides of the room. Just kind of keep it oriented up. So the first couple that I did actually did feel a little bit of snapping and cracking in there, but now it's nice and smooth. So from here, you can bring your hands back down onto the floor and just give me a little gentle rocking, kind of just to finish it up. Come on back to center when you're ready. We're going to lengthen a leg. So I'm going to lengthen my right leg and risk falling into the pool. So I'll shift my right hip and my right shoulder onto the floor, and I'll pull the roller out from underneath me. So everything is very settled and calm. And I'll just go ahead and lie here for a moment and do a reassessment. So my shoulder blades feel a little wider on the floor. And if I take a finger into my belly button, my ribs still feel like they're a little bit lifted away, but they're moving in the right direction. So that makes me happy. And then from here, I do feel like I'm more in my butt cheeks than I was before. And the back of my thighs feel like they're a little bit heavier to the floor. Dividing my body in half, right and left, I feel like I'm a little bit more evenly weighted right to left. Okay, so from here, I kept you on your back and I had you bend your knees and tuck the roller underneath your bent knees. And I'm going to engage my core, push my feet into the floor and pick my hips up. And I'm going to take the roller right underneath the back of my pelvis. From here, I had you pull your knees into your body and just let yourself relax here for a moment. Let's see if I can get a better angle on that camera. Okay. So what I'm looking for is where my shoulder blades are is to really be heavy on the mat. I'm accentuating that flexion of the thoracic spine that so many of us, including myself, really need to work on. We have a tendency to hold tension in the body and create the extension of the back. And this will work in the opposite direction and give you a little bit more flexion. So I think about Kathy and Martha and perhaps Teresa Luciano, really needing Teresa Edge to kind of needing more of that flexion in through the thoracic spine. So you can bring the knees in nice and close, or they could be a little further away. The other thing that we talked about today was any hip flexor issues that you have. In Pilates, they take the knees right straight up towards the ceiling, and that puts a little bit of tension in the hip flexors. And for a lot of you, they're exhausted from holding that tension in there all the time. So in melt method, we let the knees come in a little bit closer to the body so that you can have an opportunity to get out of them. You can see that my heels are nice and heavy towards my hips. They're not pulled away. So let them be nice and heavy. I hope that you can see that all right. Okay, so from here, I'm going to go ahead and lift the screen up a little bit. Okay, so from here, the knees are pointing at 12 o'clock, right up in towards the sky. And I'm going to let my knees drift a little bit over to the 1 o'clock side. So the knees just come over. This left butt cheek is going to be a little bit off the roller, not completely off, it's still touching, but there's not too much weight there. I'm going to let my knees draw circles, my hands stay on my rib cage. A lot of times people have a hard time differentiating movement from the legs to the ribs. So keep the ribs nice and quiet and just move through the legs. We're working through the SI joint at the back of the pelvis on the right side. From here, I'm going to hold the pelvis still, and I'm just going to circle my right knee. So that's my cue, but of course that's happening in my right hip, yeah? Heel is still nice and heavy and everything is relaxed in my body. I'm going to reverse direction. You could pay particular attention to the kind of circle that you're making. Does it have little points to your circle? Is it like an amoeba, or is it a nice round circle? And if you notice that it's not a nice round circle, then it's dryness in the hip socket. And how do you get it nice and juicy? You draw these little circles. Okay, the last thing that we do is the march. So my heels stay nice and heavy. So it's not any movement through my knee or my ankle. This is all in my hip. I'm still oriented to that 1 o'clock side. And then when you're ready, just come on back with the knees to 1 o'clock. Exhale to engage your core, and then let the knees come over to the 11 o'clock side. Now, I notice personally that it's harder for me to move to the side, that I have to pay particular attention to my ribs. So I try to keep my rib cage down as I move my knees over to the left. So I start with a little circle, maybe 3 or 4 of those. And this is working my SI joint over on the left side. I'm going to hang out here for a moment, just circle the knee on the left. Even if you've done this move a million times, just pay particular attention to the quality of the circle, the weight of the rib cage, and then reverse the direction. See if you can really perfect these very simple moves, because your body wants to compensate for movement. If it can't get the knees into the 11 o'clock position, it's going to have the rib cage come over to help you out, and that's not what we want. All right, so from here, I'm going to march. Again, I'm pointing my knees over to the 11 o'clock side. No movement in my ankle. And then I'm just going to hang out here and wait. On an exhale, I'm going to come back to center. Okay, so this next one can be kind of tricky. Let's see if I can get this to work better. Okay, what I'm doing is I'm waiting. I'm looking for that low back curve. It's a little tricky to see on my computer. I'm going to have my hands against my thighs. The heels are nice and heavy. I'm going to be a little picky, and I'm going to see if I can figure out a better way to do this. Okay. All right. So here's my hands against my thighs, and ideally both of them would be up, and I'm holding on to my little camera. And what I want you to pay particular attention to is my low back. Okay. So I'm going to lift my back away from the mat, and I'm going to tuck my back down in towards the mat. So I'm tucking and tilting. Here's my tilt, and here's my tuck. And you can see the roller moves just a little tiny bit. And you can do a pretty exaggerated move here just to kind of get you going. I always feel like the Tin Man when I do this the first few times. And then what I want to notice is that my rib cage, especially where my shoulder blades are, is ultimately going to stay on the floor. And then my movement through my low back curve is really tiny. So this is differentiation of movement from the thoracic spine to the lumbar spine, or differentiation of movement from the ribs to the low back. And ultimately, I want to find that I'm lifted away from the floor. I'm in a more of a tilt position, but my shoulder blades are still resting on the mat. I hope that makes sense. So once I'm in this position, I'm going to bring my hands back. Bring my hands back. Sorry. Bring my hands back to my thighs. And I want to hold that nice neutral position through my low back curve. A gentle press into the back of my head. And I'm going to inhale and exhale for 3. So now there's no movement of my body. It's just this drawing in of my belly button in towards my spine. You might feel a little bit of tension kind of high up into the leg. That's that psoas, or that hip flexor muscle. The next thing that we did was we went into the bent knee press. And I find this to be so much more effective to teach when I can actually touch you. But certainly under these conditions, we'll just go on and be thankful that we have Zoom. Okay, so what I've done is I've taken the right knee in towards my body, but I don't want to lose my nice neutral position. Oftentimes when people bring that knee in, they collapse into the roller. So you want to keep that low back in its nice neutral position. And you have 2 options for where to place your hands. You can put it right here at the back of the thigh. This is a great place for some students because they have tightness in their shoulders. And if they reach to the shin and they feel like their shoulders are hiking up towards the sky, then it's not a great position for the upper body. Just bring your hands back down to your thigh. I hope that makes sense. So someplace that's comfortable for you. Thinking about your left foot for a moment, sometimes I'll notice that students are resting on the outside of the left foot, and you can see my knee kind of fell over to the left. So what I want to do is make sure my big toe is staying on the mat. I can feel the big toe, the side of the foot, and my heel, and that's going to help with the alignment of my hip, my knee, and my ankle. So from here, I'm going to inhale to prepare for movement, and on my exhale, I engage my core. Shh. Then I'm going to tuck my pelvis. So there's my low back curve kind of pulling down in towards the mat. And this part is a little tricky to explain to people. It's not necessarily a physical sensation of pulling your knee away. You just think about the length that you're able to achieve on the tissue on the left leg at the thigh, at the quadricep. And I do feel like I'm pulling this knee away from my hip. So I'm lengthening this tissue. I'm going to go ahead and release that. And so I've kind of come out of that tuck, let go of that tension, and I'll do it twice more. Inhale to prepare, exhale to engage. Shh. Once I've engaged, I tuck. And then the tucking actually helps accentuate this pull of tissue. And you can further accentuate that by pulling your knee away from the front of the left hip. And then I could inhale and release. That's when the fluid pools into the front of the leg, which is what you want. Exhale to engage the core. Shh, tuck your pelvis and pull that knee away. This side of my body, I'm not really doing anything. It's just kind of there for a little extra support. When you're ready, you're going to switch the position. So now I'm going to take my right foot to the floor. I don't want it turned out. I don't want it turned in. I don't want it flopping over towards the swimming pool. I want it to be nice and neutral. Big toes on the floor, the ball of the foot, the side of the foot, and the heel. I'm going to exhale to engage my core. Shh. I'm going to tuck my pelvis, and I'm going to get this sensation of length over there on that right side. A inhale to release. Exhale to engage my core. Shh. Tuck your pelvis. Lengthen through the front of your thigh. You might want to think about pulling that right knee away from your hip. Inhale to release. One more time. Inhale and exhale. Shh. Tuck and lengthen. From here, we put that foot on the floor. You can bridge up. You could give yourself a quick little assessment here. See if you're making some nice changes. My lower body feels so much better after having done that lower body length sequence, which is giving you more room in through that low back curve. One of the things that I missed on this recording was we did a little bit of a head turn assessment. So don't worry about that. That's just a little bonus in case you happen to miss that in this replay of our moves that we did today. From here, I'm going to roll over into my shoulder and I'm going to come on up to sitting. And I think that this is one of my very favorite melt method moves, but it's also one that's probably the hardest to learn. Some of us have chronic hyperextension of the spinal column. And remember, that's where the spine is feeling like it's lifted away from the floor when you're in your rest assess position. And so that makes this particular exercise really tricky because your natural tendency is to stay in extension. But what we're trying to do is get you to flex your spine, be a little bit more mobile through the spinal column. I think it was Joseph Pilates who said something like your age is related to the ability of your body to be mobile through your spinal column. So when your spine starts to get stiff, you'll really start to notice that you're aging. So let's not do that. Okay, so again, without falling into the pool, but that would make a really fun blooper video. So, okay. So I'm going to try to do this in a couple of different positions so that you can really get a sense of what I'm doing. And notice that I'm wearing a hood, which is not always the best piece of apparel to wear for this. So to set it up, I have my knees bent, my feet are flat to the floor. I have my roller just at my back, and I'm going to come back onto my roller. So you can see it's kind of towards the bottom of my rib cage. I'm going to take my hands behind my head. This is to support the weight of my head. I want to make sure that I'm not pulling with my neck. If you notice pulling in your neck, then you are dominant through that hip flexor, and we need to get more mobility through the spinal column. I'm going to exhale to engage the core, and I'm going to pick my feet up. And all I need to do is bend my knees a little bit more, and that roller is going to find my shoulder blades. I'm going to settle my hips onto the floor, and then as a little bonus, if you want, you can kind of punch the sky And you'll notice that the shoulder blade is going to move and you'll feel it kind of crashing into the roller. And then you'll know that you're in the right spot. I have a little space under my chin. Pilates instructors say things like, you should be able to tuck an orange underneath your chin. And I always tease and say, I've never actually done that. But yeah, that's kind of the appropriate space, little piece of produce right there. So I want to keep my chin in that neutral and I want to maintain this tuck position. And then from here, I'm going to extend my upper back over the roller. And I'm only going to go as far back as I'm comfortable. Some students will lift their chin up. That's compensation. So your body goes, oh, she wants to extend over the roller. Let's go ahead and lift our chin. Or people will arch their back and people go, oh, that's what we're doing. Oh, now that feels so good, right? But that's not what we're after. We're after holding a tuck through the low back curve, holding neutral through the chin, and then letting the upper back just come as far back over the roller as it can go. I'm going to inhale and stay. And on my exhale, I'm going to side bend to my right. My eye gaze is looking right up towards the sky. And I'm going to ask myself, how far over to the right can I go? Again, a common compensatory pattern is to turn your head. And that's not what I want to do. I want to get a true, honest assessment of your spine's ability to side bend. I'm going to breathe into this left side of my rib cage and I'm going to notice if it expands or not. It might feel a little bit tight and sticky. Exhale when you're ready to come through center and then travel over to a left side bend. Again, if you feel your hair kind of moving around on your hands, you'll know that you're turning your head, which is a no-no. And I'm just going to hold this position, take a breath into the right side of my rib cage. Just notice if my ribs move. Notice how far over to the left I can go. On my exhale, I'm going to come back to center. And from here, I'm going to keep my elbows pointed up towards the ceiling. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to move. Don't let me fall into the pool. Okay, so from here, I'm in the position that we were just in, but I just want to remind you that you should be looking right over your knees when you do this. So I want to keep the roller at my shoulder blades. That's the only place that we went to today. And I'm looking right over my knees. That's accentuating the natural ability for me to flex my spine. If you notice that you're looking over towards the ceiling or even over your head, then that's your body's just tendency to get stuck in that extension, in that arch in your back. So you should be looking at me and I'm looking at you. Actually, I'm looking at me, and I'm feeling my way through the tissue that's in between my shoulder blades. That's the only place that we went today. And I'm looking for trouble. Sometimes I'll hear it like it makes all kinds of noise. Sometimes I'll feel like I want to send a little bit more weight on the right shoulder blade, whatever you want to do. We're only moving the roller, excuse me, a couple of inches. I'm going to go smaller and smaller until I stop. You could stop on an issue that you're having. Frankly, you can just stop anywhere you want to. I'm still holding that tuck position. I'm going to hold on to my tuck. Ooh, the tile is cold. And I'm going to scratch my back onto the roller, give it a good little scratch. You can feel the tissue being manipulated by the texture of your roller. Come on back to center when you're ready. Exhale to engage the core. Push into the roller and then bring it on home. I'm pushing the roller down towards the bottom of my rib cage. There's the pool right there. And I'm just going to do that a few times. Great. So that's my rinse. So I find that I have to come off of my roller to get myself set up again so that I'm in the right spot so that I can be in the same position for my reassessment that I was in for my initial assessment. Okie dokie. So I'm going to have the roller just at the bottom of my rib cage. My hands go behind my head. Let your head be heavy in your hands. Don't hurt your neck. And know that if it hurts your neck, then maybe this isn't the right melt move for you. I should have said that earlier. Pull your belly button in, pick your hips up, and I'm going to move the roller to my shoulder blades. I'm going to tuck my pelvis and I'm going to hold that tuck. And now what I'm noticing is I have more of my low back curve weighted to the floor, which is a great sign that I'm getting more mobility through my spinal column. My elbows are just relaxed at this point. I'm going to keep that little space for my orange underneath my chin. And I'm going to let the back of my shoulders come over the other side of the roller. And I feel like I have a lot more extension in my upper back now. While I'm here, I can take a breath in, exhale, and I even drop a little further back. So I can use this as a lengthening technique. I can feel that stretch from my elbows all the way down through my rib cage to my hips. Now you can stay back here if you want to for your side bend. I like to come up just a little bit, and I'm going to go into my side bend on an exhale. And I can hang out here and exhale again and see if I can get a little bit more. My focus now is on the rib cage on the left. And I just feel like it's so much easier to breathe, which is going to de-stress my nervous system and take me into my restore mode so I can heal and digest my food. I'm going to come over into the left side on an exhale. I just want to see how far I can go. Take a nice cleansing breath. Use it as a lengthening technique to further accentuate the length of the side of the body, the lateral lines and the spiral lines. It feels very different on this side. It's a lot tighter for me on this right side. I'm getting a little bit more movement through my ribs, and then I'm going to come back through center. So that is actually the reassessment for upper back glide and shear. But it's nice to do another one, just lying on your back. You won't be able to see me. Okay, so just lie on your back one more time. And let's go through the masses and spaces. So ideally, the shoulder blades should be wide and flat on the floor. If you barely notice them, they're in a good spot for you. Take a finger, poke it into your belly button, and just draw that line straight through your body. And just see if you feel like you notice that the bottom of your rib cage is on the floor. It's better to use your body awareness, your proprioception, than it is to be sliding your hands underneath you. If you just get a sense that you feel the flexion of the thoracic and a little bit of extension in the lumbar, then you're in the right place. From here, I travel down into my hips, and I'm noticing that my butt cheeks, I always make this sign when I talk about my butt cheeks. I make this sign when I talk about your butt cheeks too. It looks like that. And so I just want to make sure that I feel my butt cheeks on the floor. Ideally, my thighs, the hamstring muscles are weighted to the floor. Sometimes that's a little harder to change for people, but you're moving in the right direction if you notice that they're a little heavier. And then the last thing that we do is divide the body in half, right and left. And just notice if you're feeling evenly weighted from side to side. It's a much more efficient system for your nervous system to be working with if you feel evenly weighted right to left. If you feel heavier on one side of your body, then that's the way your body moves, and you will continue to strengthen the heavier side of your body, and the other side will become weaker and weaker over time. And that'll also add a considerable number of imbalances to the body. So I'm ready to take a nap, and that's what happens to me after I've done these kinds of moves. My body is just very relaxed, and I've tapped into that restore aspect of my nervous system. So great to do this for yourself any time of day, but so nice to do it in the evening before you go to bed, or in the morning when you get up and you're feeling a little tight and sticky. So lots of love to you. I'm just going to hang out here and just take a little nap, and I'll see you next time.